The road was supposed to end 2 hours ago. At least. That's what the map said before the signal died, and the world turned into a smear of gray trees and wet silence. I remember the way the fog pressed against the windshield like a living thing, slow and deliberate, as if it was trying to remember who we were. The headlights didn't cut through it anymore. They only made it thicker, like light itself was being swallowed. We were 3 cars when we first left the highway. Now it was just mine. I don't remember when the others disappeared. Maybe they turned off somewhere. Maybe I did. The forest around us didn't feel empty. It felt aware, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to make a mistake. Every few minutes, the radio would hiss alive on its own. Not music, not static either. Something between both. Almost like breathing that didn't belong to anything human. And then the trees started changing shape, not moving, just rearranging themselves when I wasn't looking directly at them. That's when I saw it. Not a person, not an animal. Something standing just beyond the edge of the headlights, where the fog stopped pretending to be harmless. And it didn't move when I did. It only waited, like it already knew I wasn't going to leave. The road ended without warning. One moment there was asphalt under the tires, steady and familiar. The next, it simply wasn't there anymore. Just forest. Tall trees pressed close on both sides, their shapes blurred by a slow, pale fog that moved like breath against glass. The air felt damp, cold, and strangely heavy in my lungs, as if the night itself had weight. We had been following GPS for hours. It had guided us wrong before, but never like this. The screen still glowed softly in the dark cabin. A thin blue line stretched forward into nowhere, into the trees, into something that did not feel mapped at all. Behind us, the road we came from was gone. Not blocked, not broken, gone. I looked back through the rear window. Only forest. No trail, no trace. Just silence pressing closer and closer, like it had been waiting for us to stop. The others didn't speak for a while. Only the engine hummed softly, uneven and tired, like it wasn't sure why it was still running. Then the signs appeared. At first, I thought they were normal road markers, bent metal, half hidden by fog. But as we passed, the letters shifted in the headlights. Not place names, not directions. Our names. Car after car slowed without meaning to. Windshield wipers dragged across glass even though nothing was falling. And every sign we passed felt closer than the last, like the forest was learning us piece by piece. I remember the first car disappearing. No crash, no sound, no warning. Just headlights flickering once. Then nothing where it had been. The space it occupied didn't collapse or break. It simply forgot to exist. The road swallowed it like it had never learned it was there. No one reacted fast enough. Even fear felt delayed, like it had to travel through something thick before reaching us. We stopped soon after, not because we decided to, because the road ended in hesitation. The forest pressed closer when we stood still. I could feel it in the air, in the way the fog thickened around the edges of breath. Every minute without movement made the trees feel nearer, not physically, but attentively, like they were listening harder. That's when I noticed the first change in myself. The sign ahead didn't show my name anymore. It showed something slightly wrong, a version of it, almost familiar, almost mine, as if the forest was correcting me. We tried turning around, but the tires rolled over nothing but more road, the same stretch of road. Again and again, each time we moved forward, it felt like the world was folding behind us. I remember whispering something, though I don't remember what, and the radio answered. Not music, not static, a soft repetition of my own voice. Delayed, calm, wrong. It said things I hadn't meant to say yet. The others heard it too, or pretended not to. That was worse. The forest changed slowly after that. Not visibly, not at first, but in the way silence began arriving sooner than expected, like it was learning when we would stop speaking. The headlights caught something between the trees. A shape, still, patient, not fully formed in light or shadow. And when I blinked, it was closer. We didn't agree to leave the cars. We just did. Walking felt quieter than driving. The ground soft under shoes, damp leaves pressing cold through fabric. Every step forward left a mark. But sometimes the marks appeared before we made them, fresh impressions in the fog-covered soil, waiting for us to catch up. Behind us, something followed. Not fast, not slow, exactly in our footsteps, like it already knew where we would hesitate. Whispers moved through the fog, repeating fragments of our conversations, but slightly wrong, as if the words had been overheard through water. And then I heard my own voice, ahead, calling something I didn't remember saying. We stopped walking after that. The forest didn't. It simply waited with us. Closer now, always closer. The signs no longer mattered. The road no longer mattered. Only the feeling remained that we were being guided somewhere that already knew our ending. And every time I looked back, there was never a road behind us anymore. Only the forest. Night had settled fully by the time the car felt wrong again. The road outside was a thin ribbon of pale gray, cut between walls of forest that never seemed to end. The headlights made the fog look thicker than it should have been, like it was folding inward instead of moving past. I kept my eyes forward. Still, something in the car felt off. At first, it was only a pressure in the back seat, not weight, not movement, just awareness, like someone sitting too still. I checked the mirror once. Nothing unusual, just faces I knew, tired, quiet, stained by hours of travel and silence. But when I looked away, I felt it again, a fourth presence. No one spoke about it. That was the first strange thing, because I knew they felt it too. The radio clicked on by itself, soft static at first, then something like breathing inside the static, slow, patient, and then words, my words, said a few seconds before I thought them. I stopped speaking after that, just to test it. The radio didn't stop. It kept going anyway, as if it didn't need me anymore. The mirror caught something behind me when I wasn't looking directly, a shape not clear enough to define, but wrong enough to notice. It didn't move like the rest of us. It moved like it was deciding whether movement was necessary. I asked if anyone else saw it. No answer came. Only the hum of tires over broken road. Only silence pretending to be normal. The rear view mirror changed when I blinked. Breath appeared on the glass. Slow, controlled, too deliberate to belong to anyone tired. And it only showed when everything else went quiet. So we stopped talking. That made it worse. The silence filled the car like something physical. Heavy, pressing, listening back. Then the radio whispered again. Not from speakers. From inside the car itself. It repeated what I was thinking. Not just words. Intentions. I pressed my hands harder on the wheel. The road curved gently ahead, disappearing into fog that looked almost soft, almost safe. But the shape in the back seat leaned slightly forward, just enough to change the air. No one turned around. That was the rule we didn't say out loud. If we didn't look, it couldn't fully exist. But mirrors don't obey rules. The rear view showed it clearer now. A silhouette that wasn't fully aligned with the seat, like it was sitting half a second out of phase with the world, and it was breathing too slowly, too evenly, as if practicing how to be alive. The radio crackled again, my voice closer now, speaking thoughts I hadn't finished forming. The others shifted in their seats, restless without explanation, like something inside them was being gently pulled in different directions. We drove faster. The forest responded by coming closer. Not physically, visually. The trees felt nearer even though distance never changed. And the passenger seat shifted slightly forward. No one touched it. I didn't ask who it was, because part of me already knew. The car passed under a low branch, fog scraping the windshield like cold breath. And in that moment, I saw the silhouette clearly. It was not sitting in the back anymore. It was reflected in the glass between us, right behind my shoulder, watching, waiting, as if it had always been there. We left the vehicles when the road stopped meaning anything. The fog outside was thicker than memory. Not white, not gray. Something in between, like erased time hanging in the air. Every step into it felt soft, uncertain, as if the ground was deciding whether to exist under us. The moment my foot touched soil, I saw something impossible. A footprint, already there. Fresh, waiting. Before I moved, I froze, but the mark didn't change. It only stayed, prepared. The others didn't react at first. Then they saw it too, and still none of us turned back, because behind us, the road was already gone. Not hidden, not faded, removed. The fog moved in slow pulses, like breathing through a vast sleeping body. Each exhale brought whispers, not words we were speaking. Words we had spoken before arriving, but slightly wrong. Misplaced syllables, shifted meanings, as if the fog was trying to correct our conversations from memory. We walked anyway, and the footprints continued ahead of us, always one step early. Something followed behind. We couldn't see it directly, but it used our old steps like a path. Every place we had just been became a guide for something else, something patient, something learning. Then I heard my own voice again, not behind me, ahead, calling my name, perfectly shaped, except I didn't remember speaking. The fog there thickened, forming a loose outline of a figure standing just out of reach. Still, waiting. It sounded like me, but emptier. The others stopped when I did, not because I told them to, because the fog had already decided we were stopping. The footprints ahead paused too, as if waiting for permission to continue existing. Behind us, something stepped exactly where we had stepped before. Perfect timing, perfect imitation. We didn't run. Running felt like agreeing with the forest, so we walked slower instead. That made the footprints ahead slow down too, matching us. The fog tightened in small circles around our legs. Cold, damp, listening. Whispers grew clearer, repeating conversations we had earlier, but misremembered. Arguments we never had. Laughter that didn't belong to anyone present. And always the same pattern. Something was ahead of us. Something was behind us. And both were learning the same shape. We stopped again when the voices merged, front and back. Both saying my name at once. Different tones. Same source. And for the first time, the fog felt aware that we understood it. It didn't react. It waited, like it had been doing this longer than we had been alive to notice. The village appeared without a rival. One moment there was only forest. The next, buildings stood where trees should have been. Lights flickered inside windows in slow loops, always repeating the same dim patterns. The road beneath our feet turned to cracked pavement that felt too clean for something abandoned. Everything was still, too still. Clocks in every visible house showed the same time. Frozen, not broken. Paused. We stepped forward anyway. The air changed immediately. Heavier, warmer. Watched. Inside the windows, people moved. But not like people. They repeated the same gestures endlessly. Pouring water. Sitting down. Standing up. Wiping tables that were already clean. Again and again. No variation. No awareness. Then I noticed something worse. They weren't ignoring us. They were watching us through repetition. Every loop paused exactly when we passed a window. Eyes aligned perfectly with movement. Never blinking. We kept walking. The lights flickered in synchronized rhythm now. Not random. Coordinated. Like the town was adjusting itself to us. A bell rang somewhere. Once. Then stopped. And started again from the beginning. Same tone. Same timing. The town had no beginning or end. Only loops. A man inside a doorway turned toward us. Paused mid-motion. Held still too long. Then reset back to the start of the movement again. I realized we were being studied through repetition. Not seen. Recorded. And rewritten. The silence outside felt heavier than inside the buildings. Because outside nothing reset. Yet, we reached the center of the village. Every window facing us. Every reflection paused at once. All clocks struck the same frozen minute. And in perfect unity, every head inside turned slightly toward us. Not in greeting, in recognition. As if we had already passed through here before. Many times. And would again. We found the car just beyond the village edge. It sat alone on a roadside, half swallowed by fog, headlights still faintly glowing like tired eyes refusing to close. The engine was warm, too warm for something abandoned. Inside, everything looked normal at first. key still in ignition, dust forming too evenly across the dashboard, a half-finished drink in the cup holder, barely trembling with the vibration of the world. But then I noticed the dash cam. It was still recording. We played it. The footage showed the same road behind us, the same forest, the same slow, patient fog, and then us, walking, entering the forest hours before we ever left. No one spoke in the recording, but we were moving like we already knew where to go. The camera angle shifted slightly, and in the reflection of the windshield, something stood outside the car, waving, from the wrong side of reality. The recording ended abruptly, not with static, with silence, like it had decided to stop remembering. The GPS inside the car refreshed on its own. The same road appeared again, a loop that had no beginning, no exit, only return. Then something knocked from the trunk. Once, soft, patient. No one moved toward it, but we all heard it breathe after the knock, like it had been waiting inside longer than the car had existed. The forest changed when we stopped looking directly at it. At first, it was subtle, a branch slightly closer than before, a shadow angled differently than memory allowed. But when we looked away for too long, the trees leaned, not bending, listening. Their trunks shifted orientation in small, impossible adjustments, always angling toward where we had been standing moments earlier, as if studying our absence. The air smelled damp and metallic, like rain that never fell but was always remembered. We moved deeper, without meaning to. The ground softened underfoot, leaves pressing cold through shoes like quiet pressure from below. And then I heard it, rustling, but not wind, something forming language between branches, words half-formed, carried in broken syllables that dissolved when focused on. One of us touched a tree. It felt warm, wrongly warm, like skin pretending to be wood. That night, we slept near a tight circle of trunks, but the circle wasn't there before we closed our eyes. I remember waking once, branches closer than they should have been, not touching us, just close enough to suggest they could. A faint brush moved across my shoulder, slow, testing. When I turned, nothing was there, but the circle had tightened, smaller than before, as if the forest had shifted inward during sleep. We stopped speaking after that, because even silence felt like something the trees could hear. The map wasn't supposed to change. It was folded flat on the dashboard, edges worn, ink faded from old use. But when I opened it again, the roads had moved, not drawn differently, moved, like the paper itself was remembering new geography. We traced the lines with trembling fingers. Every route now curved closer to where we stood, as if everything outside the car had started orbiting us. Ink gathered in small clusters between roads. At first, I thought it was stains. Then the shapes shifted. Faces, not clear, not defined, but watching. We folded the map again. The paper felt warm, alive in a way paper should not be. When we reopened it, the roads had changed again, closer still. Every destination now pointed inward. No exits, only depth. We marked one supposed escape route, a straight line leading away from everything. But when my finger touched it, the ink disappeared, not faded, erased, like it had refused to be real. The map exhaled softly when folded shut, a slow, papery breath, as if relieved we were still following it. We stopped trusting directions after that, but the map didn't stop changing. The radio stopped behaving like a machine. It started behaving like awareness. At first, it played fragments of conversations, not random ones, ours, but shifted slightly forward in time. Arguments we hadn't had yet, decisions we were still thinking about. Then the static changed rhythm. It matched something steady, a pulse, like a heartbeat trapped inside frequency. Every time we spoke, the radio answered a few seconds earlier, predicting tone, predicting intent, then correcting it. We stopped talking. That didn't help, because silence had already been recorded, and played back anyway. A voice began speaking directly through interference, not announcing itself, just continuing our thoughts out loud, the same way we would have finished them, only faster, more certain. The cabin filled with that layered sound, Real voices and echoed ones overlapping until it became impossible to tell which was present. The trees outside flickered past in slow motion, but even they felt like they were listening. The radio didn't need volume anymore. It only needed attention, and it had all of ours. The cabin appeared during rain. Not heavy rain, just enough to make everything feel temporary. Wooden structure, dim light inside, smoke from a chimney that should not have been warm. We hesitated before entering, but the cold made the decision for us. Inside, warmth waited, two perfectly arranged, dry clothes folded near a chair, food still steaming on a table, a fire burning low but steady, as if recently adjusted. Someone had been here, recently, but no one was visible. On the wall, names were carved into wood. Ours, not written, etched, as if someone had practiced them slowly, carefully, long before meeting us. Upstairs footsteps moved, soft, measured. There was no upstairs. We checked, only ceiling. Still, the sound continued. Someone resetting the table behind us made every item return to its original position the moment we looked away. We tried to leave. The door opened into the same room again. Warm, lit, waiting, and the fire grew slightly taller when we hesitated, like it recognized uncertainty. Then a name appeared in the wood beside the fireplace. Mine, freshly carved, still faintly warm. It started with a crack in the asphalt, small, almost harmless. Then the ground softened beneath the car's weight, not collapsing, yielding. We stepped out just in time to see the surface give way, and beneath it another road, perfectly straight, perfectly intact, too clean to belong underground. It reflected our movement exactly, but delayed by a few seconds. When we walked left, it walked left after us. When we stopped, it stopped later. Something was driving down there, in reverse, following our timeline backward. We backed away from the edge, but the ground no longer felt solid anywhere nearby. Each step sank slightly deeper than before, like layers of road were stacking beneath us. The forest above remained still, unaware, or pretending not to be. Then headlights appeared below the surface, moving in perfect opposition to ours, matching speed, matching distance, only inverted. We didn't look long, because the road beneath had already begun learning how we moved, and it was getting faster at remembering. It started with echoes that didn't belong to the moment. We would speak and hear it again from somewhere else, not delayed, not repeated normally, wrongly placed like the world was misquoting us. A word said softly would return louder from behind us. A laugh would drift back from a direction no one stood in. Then it began changing meaning. Sentences came back slightly altered, as if corrected by something that understood us better than we did. One scream broke the pattern. It didn't stop, even after the person was silent. It continued from multiple places at once, stretching through fog and trees until it felt less like sound and more like presence. We stopped trusting direction, because sound no longer told the truth. Silence became worse. Silence started answering. A soft imitation of laughter moved through the air near our shoulders. Perfect timing, perfect tone, too perfect to be human. It didn't repeat what we said anymore. It predicted what we would say next. Sunset never finished. The sky stayed caught in a half-breath of orange and gray, like the day refused to fully leave. We noticed it when the clocks reset slightly. Not fully, just enough to feel wrong. Minutes slipped backward, without warning. A conversation would restart halfway through itself, as if the world forgot the ending. One of us remembered things the others didn't. He stopped trusting his own memory, then stopped trusting ours. The sky above showed faint fractures, like glass stretched too thin. Every hour, the same stretch of road returned in front of us. Same fog, same silence, same angle of dying light. We began recognizing loops before they happened. That was worse, because it meant we were learning the pattern, and something else was learning it faster. The repetition didn't feel random anymore. It felt practice, like the night had done this before, many times, and we were just the latest attempt. The forest changed when reflection became unreliable. Wet leaves showed our shapes before we moved. Tree bark held versions of us that weren't standing where they should be. One reflection raised its hand before I did. Another turned away while I was still facing forward. We stopped trusting surfaces. But surfaces didn't stop watching. Between trunks, mirrored images flickered, arriving where we had not yet reached, like the forest remembered our future wrong. We saw ourselves walking into it before we had even chosen a direction. Paths began splitting depending on which reflection we followed. Some versions led deeper. Some led nowhere. All of them felt correct until they weren't. One figure appeared in reflections only, waving gently, never present in real space. We avoided mirrors after that. But reflections don't need permission to exist. They only need something to copy. The car stopped speaking like a machine. It started speaking like memory. When the engine idled, faint voices emerged from inside it, not random words. Fragments of things we had never said out loud. Private thoughts, half-formed regrets. The engine repeated them softly, like it was testing how honest we were. We tried ignoring it, but it only grew clearer. The vehicle reacted to silence inside the cabin. It stalled whenever certain truths were spoken, like it refused to move when honesty was too heavy. Starting it felt wrong after a while, like waking something that had been listening the entire time. The car began choosing directions on its own, avoiding roads we looked at too long, refusing paths that felt too direct, as if it preferred uncertainty, or was protecting something deeper than us. We stopped arguing with it, because the engine always answered first. We lit a fire out of habit, not comfort. Habit. The flames rose slowly, bending in unnatural rhythm, like they were reacting to the tone of our breathing. When we spoke softly, the fire calmed. When we raised our voices, it stretched upward, alert, watching. Smoke didn't drift away. It gathered, forming shapes that resembled faces for only a second at a time, then collapsing back into ash-gray motion. Silence made the fire grow taller, like it preferred observation over conversation. A name appeared on a burn log, not written by us. Etched from heat we didn't produce. One of ours. We didn't ask how it knew, because the fire answered before questions formed. It flickered once, as if agreeing. Then it leaned slightly toward us, not physically, but attentively, like it was waiting for the next thing we would admit, without speaking it. Time stopped behaving like something we could hold on to. One moment we were walking through thin fog, under pale sky. The next, the sky had shifted slightly without permission. No warning, no transition, just absence. My watch jumped forward by hours, then jumped back again, like it couldn't decide what had happened to us. We tried to remember the missing time. Nothing came, only gaps. Soft, uncomfortable gaps in memory that felt like something had been removed carefully, not taken. A recording on a phone showed us moving through the forest, but none of us remembered filming it. In the footage, we were walking faster than we ever walked, stopping where nothing told us to stop, and speaking words we couldn't hear clearly now. The forest in the background looked different in each frame, as if it was adjusting itself between seconds. One of us woke up later, far ahead on the road, sitting upright, already moving again. He couldn't explain how he got there. None of us could. And the worst part, we didn't know what happened in the missing hours, only that something did. Without us, it didn't stay visible long enough to be confirmed, only between blinks. A tall shape standing where trees should have been still. When we focused on it, it wasn't there. When we stopped focusing, it returned, always slightly closer. Headlights caught fragments of it in fog. Too thin to be human, too stable to be wind. Cameras refused to hold it. Every recording showed empty space where it should have been, but the pressure in the air remained, like something occupying attention instead of form. It never faced us fully, only angles, edges, never complete. The moment we tried to approach, it appeared behind us again. Same distance, same posture, never chasing, only repositioning, as if it already knew where we would end up standing. We stopped turning around after a while, because every direction felt like it had already been chosen for us. We began hearing cars before seeing them, parked ones, Engine sounds coming from vehicles that should have been dead for years. Soft idling, perfectly steady, like something resting inside them. When we approached, doors opened slightly on their own. Not fully, just enough to suggest invitation. Inside, the seats were warm, freshly used. Horns sometimes beeped in patterns that didn't feel random anymore. Short, long pause, like messages trying to form language. We recognized it too late. It was structured, not noise, communication. One vehicle we checked held passengers inside, still sitting upright, still facing forward. Two still, no breathing visible, but posture unchanged for hours that didn't make sense. When we turned away, the engine inside had started again. Even though no ignition was touched, the silence afterward felt heavier than the sound, because silence was what came after acknowledgement. It began when someone spoke a name too clearly. The trees answered, not verbally, but through repetition. The wind. The same name echoed between branches, perfectly shaped, perfectly remembered. Then it happened again, and again. Names began appearing carved into bark overnight. Fresh cuts with no tool marks. Clean, intentional, as if the forest had practiced writing them. We stopped saying names aloud. That made them appear slower, but not stop. The forest corrected pronunciation when we got it wrong. A branch would creak, leaves would shift, air would tighten slightly around mispronounced syllables. It remembered every voice perfectly, even the ones spoken in sleep. Something moved more often when we called out, not responding, approaching. So we learned silence. But even silence had names inside it now, waiting to be heard. The GPS stopped showing Earth entirely. Coordinates changed into patterns that made no sense. Too precise, too clean. The road straightened beyond what nature allows. No curves, no variation, just endless forward motion. The sky above lost color slowly. Not dark, not bright, just erased saturation, like reality was being drained of preference. Distance stopped matching speed. We drove for what should have been minutes, but the scenery barely changed. Then changed too much. Something traveled beside us outside perception, not visible in mirrors, not visible in windows, but always there, matching motion perfectly. We stopped trying to measure where we were, because every measurement came back slightly different, and always wrong in the same direction. Forward, the highway didn't feel like it led somewhere anymore. It felt like it was building us into something that could continue along it without asking why. It happened without warning. Every device went quiet at the same moment. No fade, no distortion, just absence. Phones turned blank. Radios stopped mid-breath. Even distant night insects fell into silence like they had been switched off from the world. The forest changed immediately, not visually, audibly, because now there was nothing left to hide inside sound. Breathing became too loud, too real. Every inhale felt exposed in the open air, like it belonged to someone else hearing it. We stopped speaking, but silence didn't stay empty. It filled itself with pressure, not noise, structure, like something shaped the silence into form and then waited inside it. When we moved, the silence moved with us, not behind, not around, inside. Something communicated only in those gaps, between thoughts, between blinks, between heartbeats that felt slightly delayed. We realized too late. Silence was not the absence of sound. It was something listening back. The passenger seat changed when no one was looking directly at it. At first, it was subtle, a slight indentation in the fabric that didn't match any of us. Then a deeper imprint formed, like someone had been sitting there for a long time, without ever leaving. The seatbelt tightened on its own one night, slowly, carefully, as if remembering a body. When we mentioned names inside the car, the temperature shifted, not randomly, specifically. Warm when certain names were spoken, cold when others were avoided. The seat began leaning back slightly on its own, never fully reclining, just enough to suggest comfort or familiarity. We stopped placing things there, but it didn't matter, because the seat didn't need objects to remember occupancy. It remembered presence, and presence doesn't leave just because space becomes empty. We saw the exit sign before we reached it. Bright, clear, impossible in that fog. It should have meant escape. But when we drove toward it, it drifted further down the road, not moving fast, just always staying out of reach. Every attempt to approach made it recede more, like distance itself was reacting to intention. We tried slowing down. It slowed too. We tried speeding up. It moved further ahead. The exit only existed when we stopped chasing it. When we looked away, it appeared closer. When we focused on it, it vanished into fog again. Hope became something unstable, a target that refused to be seen directly. We learned the pattern too late. It wasn't guiding us out. It was measuring how long we would keep trying, and how far we would go before realizing it was never meant to be reached. It only appeared when light touched it fully. Not shadows, not corners, only direct illumination, standing in the exact reach of headlights, where everything should have been visible and safe. But it wasn't safe. It never moved like anything alive should. When we approached, it disappeared. When we stopped, it reappeared behind us, always resetting position, never chasing, only arranging itself around us, like it already knew every direction we would take. Its shape imitated posture, but never motion, almost human, but delayed in a way that made reality feel slightly off rhythm. Headlights became boundaries instead of tools. Light didn't reveal it. Light defined it. We learned not to look directly for too long, because it seemed to notice when it was being understood, and understanding made it closer. Every time, the forest didn't end. It folded, slowly, quietly, without announcement. The road that once carried us forward began feeling like it was turning inward instead. Distances stopped meaning escape. They started feeling like memory. We noticed it when conversations repeated with slight differences. Same words, wrong emotion, same moments, shifted intent. The vehicle didn't need fuel anymore. It just moved, as if direction had become unnecessary. We stopped recognizing where we were going, because going no longer felt external. The forest outside the windows began resembling fragments of thought, familiar shapes, familiar silence, like pieces of something remembered too often. We didn't leave the road. We became part of its continuation, and the final realization didn't arrive suddenly. It settled in slowly, quietly, like fog finding its place inside breathing. We were never moving through it. We were already inside what it was becoming, and somewhere the road kept going, without us noticing we had stopped being separate from it. I still remember the night I first heard it. The woods were too quiet, not the normal kind of quiet either, not the soft rustle of leaves or distant night insects. This was something else, something deliberate, like the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to notice. I had stepped outside the cabin just to check the old generator. The light above the porch flickered weakly, casting broken shadows across the ground. Every beam of light seemed swallowed a few feet away, where the trees began. Thick fog rolled between the trunks like it had weight, like it was alive. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, slow, measured, just beyond the tree line. I froze, listening, waiting for another sound, maybe an animal, maybe a branch snapping. But there was nothing, only those footsteps, circling where I couldn't see. I called out once. My voice disappeared into the fog, like it never existed. Then the footsteps stopped, and for a moment, there was complete silence, not even wind. That's when I saw it. Something standing between the trees, too still to be real, too shaped to be natural, watching me without moving. And even now, I still can't explain what happened next, because when I turned back toward the cabin, I realized the footsteps weren't in the woods anymore. They were behind me. The cabin sits far beyond the marked road, past the last bend where GPS loses signal, and the trees grow too close together. I arrived just before sunset. The air already felt colder than it should have been for early autumn. Dry leaves under my boots, brittle and quiet, like they didn't want to be stepped on. The cabin itself is small, wooden, old enough that the paint doesn't peel anymore. It just disappears into the grain. Inside, everything smells like dust and forgotten smoke. A place that has been waiting without knowing who it was waiting for. I came here for writing, for silence that doesn't belong to anyone else. By nightfall, the forest fully closed around me, not visually, but emotionally, like the distance between trees and walls had disappeared. The lantern outside flickered without wind, light bending strangely, like it was unsure how to exist in this place. I remember sitting at the small desk near the window, paper untouched, pen still capped, listening to the kind of silence that feels too complete. That's when I heard the first step. Not inside the cabin, not far away either, just outside. A single footstep in the leaves. Then another, slow, measured, walking a circle around the cabin, like it already knew the shape of the place. I stood up without thinking. The floorboards didn't creak under me. That was the first wrong detail. I moved closer to the window. Fog pressed against the glass like a pale breath. The lantern light stretched into it, breaking apart. Footsteps continued, never rushing, never changing rhythm. I opened the door slowly. Cold air spilled in like water. Nothing was there, just the trees. Still, heavy, watching without eyes. But the ground should have told me something. No prints, no broken leaves, no sign that anything had moved at all. And yet I know what I heard, because it didn't stop when I went back inside. It only changed distance. Closer now, circling again. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark listening to a rhythm that didn't belong to anything alive I knew. And just before morning came, the lantern outside flickered one last time, then went still, like whatever was walking finally decided it had learned enough about me. Morning in the forest should feel like reset, but here it felt like continuation. I stepped outside expecting answers. Instead, the air felt rearranged. The tree line was closer, not by much, but enough that my mind kept measuring it again and again, refusing to accept the first result. Where there had been open space yesterday, there were now trunks, thicker, darker, standing where I was sure there had been distance. The forest wasn't growing. It was approaching. I walked forward just to confirm it. Leaves crunched softly under my steps, damp from overnight mist. But the deeper I looked between the trees, the more it felt like they were leaning inward, watching without moving. Something stood among them. A deer, perfectly still, not grazing, not alert, just frozen with its head angled slightly toward the cabin. Its breath didn't show in the cold air. I watched it for a long time, long enough that my eyes started to hurt from not blinking. It never moved, not even once. When I finally looked away and looked back, it was still there, same position, same silence, but the forest around it felt tighter, as if the space itself had shrunk to keep it contained. I tried to mark the distance to the tree line using broken branches along the ground. Simple logic, something to hold on to. But every marker I placed felt closer than the last, like the forest was stepping forward when I wasn't looking directly at it. By afternoon, I was certain of one thing. The cabin was not in the forest anymore. The forest was gathering around the cabin, waiting, adjusting, learning its perimeter. And the deer was still there when the light faded, still watching the same direction, still not breathing. That night, the wind stopped behaving like wind. At first, it was subtle, a stillness that felt accidental. Then it became structured. Certain parts of the forest moved. Others did not, like invisible walls had divided the air into sections. I stood outside trying to understand it. My breath came out steady, visible, then gone. But the trees only shifted in narrow bands, like something was brushing through them in controlled paths. Not random, not natural. The footsteps returned. But this time they matched my breathing. Each inhale seemed to carry a step. Each exhale removed it. I stopped breathing just to test it. The forest went silent. Then the radio inside the cabin turned on by itself. Static filled the room when I rushed back inside. But underneath it, there was something else. Whispers. Not words I could hold on to. Just patterns that felt like speech that had been stretched too thin. I turned the dial. Nothing changed. The static shifted when I did, like it was listening to my hand. Outside, the wind returned in short bursts, not continuous, not flowing, like someone was turning it on and off. I realized then that the forest wasn't ignoring me. It was responding to me. Every movement, I made had a reaction somewhere beyond sight, and the footsteps, they were no longer circling. They were pacing with me, waiting for me to move again. The first knock came from inside the walls. Soft, careful, like something didn't want to wake me too quickly. I froze where I stood in the kitchen. The second knock followed immediately. Same rhythm, same pressure, but I hadn't moved. I pressed my ear against the wall, with cold against skin. Nothing. Then my own voice came from outside the window. Not a scream, not a call for help. Just me, saying nothing I remember saying. Slow, calm, too calm. I walked toward the window and stopped before looking, because I already knew what I would see. Inside, every sound I made began returning wrong. My footsteps echoed a fraction too late. My breath came back slightly deeper than I remembered it. The cabin wasn't reflecting sound. It was editing it. Another knock. Closer this time. Not on the wall. On the floor beneath me. I stepped back. The floor did not respond immediately. It waited, then shifted, like something underneath had adjusted its position. I realized I was no longer alone in the structure. I had only been the most visible thing inside it. Morning came without clarity. The ground outside the cabin was wet, not from rain, from something that settled overnight and never fully left. I stepped out carefully. That's when I saw them. Footprints, perfectly spaced, too clean for mud, too precise for chance. They formed a circle around the cabin, not wide, not distant, close enough that whoever made them had been standing just beyond the walls the entire night. I followed the ring slowly. Each step I took felt like completing someone else's path. The prints never changed depth, never broke formation. But the strange part wasn't their shape. It was where they stopped. Every time I completed a full circle, the trail ended at the same point. No continuation, no exit direction. Just a final step that didn't lead anywhere. I checked for entry paths, for exit routes, for anything logical. There were none. It was as if something had walked in a perfect loop and then decided the loop was enough. Enough to observe. Enough to learn. When I stood back and looked at the cabin again, the windows felt darker than before, not reflecting light, absorbing it. And I couldn't shake the feeling that the footprints weren't evidence of something leaving. They were evidence of something deciding where it would stand next. The forest felt thinner that night. Not quieter, just more exposed. I stayed inside the cabin longer than usual, watching the window instead of the woods. The glass had turned slightly cold, even though nothing had changed in temperature. Then I saw it, between the pines, a shape that didn't belong to distance. It stood too still to be a person waiting, and too defined to be missed. I blinked. It was gone. I told myself it was light, a trick of fog shifting between trunks. But then it appeared again. Always during the moment, I wasn't fully looking, never walking, never turning, just existing in broken intervals of my attention. I tried to record it. The camera screen flickered before I even aimed it properly. Static spread across the display, like it had been waiting inside the device. When I checked the forest again, the figure was closer, not physically closer, perceptually closer, like the space between us had lost consistency. I stopped blinking for a while. The forest didn't like that. It felt heavier. When I finally blinked, it was there again, unchanged, unmoved. But now I understood something worse. It wasn't approaching me. It only appeared when I failed to confirm its absence, as if my attention was the only thing keeping it from becoming permanent. That night, I stopped looking directly at the pines, but I could still feel it watching the parts of me I wasn't using. I spoke into the forest without meaning to, just a sentence. Half thought, half breath. Is anyone there? The words disappeared immediately into fog. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the forest answered. My voice came back. Exact. Calm. Too clean. Is anyone there? Not an echo. A return. A repetition that didn't degrade or fade. I stepped outside, slowly listening. My own question repeated again from somewhere deeper in the trees. Then again, and again, each version slightly delayed, like the forest was learning how to speak in sequence. I tried saying something different. Stop. The forest repeated it. Stop. But the second repetition came faster than the first. like it was catching up. Soon there were multiple versions of my voice overlapping through the trees, some delayed, some almost simultaneous, all wrong in timing. I covered my ears. It didn't help. The sound wasn't entering through hearing anymore. It was entering through recognition, as if the forest was reconstructing me piece by piece. When I finally went back inside, I noticed something that made my chest tighten. My voice from outside was now repeating inside the cabin walls, not from the forest anymore, from within the structure itself. The first step inside the walls was subtle. I thought it was settling wood. Then it happened again, slow, controlled, like something pacing in a space too narrow to stand in. I pressed my palm against the wall. It felt hollow in a way it shouldn't have been. Not empty, but occupied. The footsteps continued, moving horizontally, then vertically, then stopping altogether. Waiting. I moved room to room. Every wall carried the same sense of pressure now, as if the cabin had become a shelf or something that had chosen not to fully reveal itself. I called out once. My voice didn't echo this time. It was absorbed, then returned as a knock. From inside the structure, the floor creaked under me even when I wasn't moving. Not randomly, respondingly. I realized something I didn't want to understand. The cabin wasn't being invaded. It was being shared. And I was no longer the only one learning its layout. That night, I didn't sit down. Because every time I stopped moving, the footsteps inside the walls slowed too, listening, matching, waiting for me to become still enough to locate completely. I placed a camera in the trees to prove I wasn't imagining things. Simple setup, clear angle toward the cabin. I told myself I'd check in the morning, but I didn't sleep. At dawn, the camera was gone. No broken strap, no disturbed ground, no sign of removal, just absence. Where it had been felt wrong, like the forest had forgotten continue existing there. I walked farther than I should have to find it. That's when I saw the footage still on my device. Last recording. It showed my cabin window, myself inside, sitting still, watching nothing. Then the image shifted slightly. A figure stood behind me, too close, not entering the frame, already inside it, watching me from within the room. I turned immediately. The cabin was empty, but the recording didn't stop. It continued showing the figure standing over where I had been sitting, patient, motionless, as if it was waiting for me to return to the version of myself it had already seen. When I looked up again, the forest felt different. Not changed, recorded. The mirror in the cabin bathroom stopped behaving like a mirror. At first, it lagged. My movements appeared half a second late. Small delay, easy to dismiss. Then it changed. I raised my hand. The reflection raised it slower. But not just slower, differently, as if it was deciding how to move rather than copying. I leaned closer. The reflection leaned slightly to the side instead of forward. Wrong angle, wrong intention. I stepped back immediately. The reflection stayed closer than I did. That shouldn't have been possible. I turned the faucet on just to test it. Water ran cold into the sink, but the reflection didn't react to it. It smiled instead. I didn't. I backed out of the bathroom slowly. The mirror didn't follow me. It didn't need to, because now I understood something I couldn't unthink. It wasn't reflecting me. It was observing me when I wasn't looking at myself. And the longer I stayed inside the cabin, the less certain I became that the version of me in the mirror was the one I had left inside it. The forest started speaking when I stopped expecting silence. It wasn't loud. It was careful, like something testing whether I was still listening. That night, I stood outside the cabin longer than I meant to. Fog wrapped low around my legs, cold and damp, clinging to fabric and skin. Then I heard it. My name, soft, almost affectionate, carried through the trees like breath moving through paper. I froze immediately. The voice didn't come from one direction. It came from all directions at once, slightly out of sync. Aksa. I hadn't told anyone my name out loud since arriving. The forest repeated it again, closer this time, not louder, just nearer. I stepped back into the cabin slowly, but the voice followed without footsteps. Inside, the walls felt tighter than before, like the structure was shrinking around what it had just learned. Then it spoke again, But this time it wasn't just my name. It spoke a memory. Something I never said aloud. Something I barely thought about anymore. A moment from years ago. Small, private, forgotten. The voice repeated it perfectly. Not as words, as feeling. I turned off every light. It didn't matter. The whisper was now inside the dark, and it knew things I had never taught it to remember. Morning brought something new. A tree, too close to the cabin. I stood at the window for a long time just staring at it, trying to understand how I had missed it before. It wasn't there yesterday. I was certain of that. The bark looked older than the surrounding forest, darker, wetter, as if it had been growing in a place where light never fully arrived. I stepped outside carefully. The air around the tree felt different, heavier, warm in patches where it shouldn't have been. Something about it felt positioned, not grown, placed. When I got closer, I saw markings in the bark, lines carved in repeating shapes, footprints, not random scratches, intentional impressions, as if something had pressed itself into the tree again and again until the wood remembered it. I reached out without thinking. My fingers stopped just before touching it. The surface seemed to react to my presence. A slow tightening, a slight shift, like it recognized me. I pulled my hand back immediately, and for a moment, I was certain the tree had leaned closer when I wasn't looking directly at it. Not growing, approaching. It started under my feet, a slow rise, then fall, barely noticeable at first, like standing on something that forgot how to stay still. The forest floor wasn't solid anymore. It had rhythm. I knelt down and pressed my palm into the soil. Warm, not from sun, not from decay, from something underneath, something that didn't want the cold to reach it. The ground shifted again, a gentle lift this time, followed by a soft release, like breathing. I pulled my hand back quickly. Dirt clung to my skin in a way that felt too intentional, like it wanted to stay. From deep in the forest, I heard the trees creak, not in wind, but in response, as if everything above the ground was reacting to something moving beneath it. I stood still for a long time, trying not to disturb the rhythm, but the more I stayed quiet, the more aware I became of it. The forest wasn't just surrounding me anymore. It was layered, and I was standing on one of its slowest breaths. That night, I tested the door. I don't know why. Maybe because I needed to confirm something still obeyed normal physics. The handle was cold, familiar. I turned it slowly. The door opened, but not toward me. It opened away from me, like I was on the wrong side of it. I stepped back immediately. The door remained open for a moment longer than it should have, then closed on its own. No wind, no push, just decision. I tried again. Same result. The cabin wasn't rejecting entry or exit. It was changing orientation depending on intention. That night, I heard the handle move from outside. Once, then again, slow testing. Patient, as if something was learning when I would try to leave. I didn't sleep, because every time I closed my eyes, I felt the door waiting for the exact moment I forgot it existed. I woke before dawn, not from sound, from absence. The forest had changed again. I stepped outside and saw them immediately. Animals, every direction. Deer, birds, small shapes I couldn't fully identify at first. All standing in a perfect ring around the cabin, facing inward, not feeding, not moving, not reacting, just watching. Their bodies were still in a way that didn't match life. No blinking, no shifting weight, no fear. The silence between them felt arranged, like someone had placed each of them carefully into position and removed the ability to leave. I walked slowly toward the edge of the circle. None of them reacted, not even when I got close enough to hear their breath. If they were breathing, I followed the ring halfway around. Still nothing changed. Then, all at once, they vanished. Not ran, not scattered, just gone. Every single one. At the exact same moment. No sound left behind. Only empty space where something had been holding still for too long. When I turned back toward the cabin, I realized something worse. The circle wasn't gone. It had only been cleared, waiting to be filled again. The trail behind the cabin had hardened overnight. Cold earth, thin frost, Pine needles pressed flat like old paper. Morning light filtered through the trees in pale strips, quiet enough that I could hear my own breathing settle into rhythm. Step, breath, step. The woods answered slowly. Branches shifted above me. A crow moved somewhere unseen. Then another step followed mine. Soft, measured. I stopped. The forest stopped with me. Only wind remained, sliding through branches like fingers through hair. I waited. Nothing moved. So I walked again. Step, breath, step, and again, another step, not behind, beside me, close enough that I felt it through the ground rather than heard it. A pressure in the soil. A second weight sharing the path. I glanced sideways. Empty air, pale trunks, fog clinging low to the roots. But the rhythm stayed. My pace quickened without permission. The second rhythm matched it. Perfect distance. Never overlapping. It walked with me. Never ahead, never behind, always beside. I slowed deliberately. The other footsteps slowed too. A quiet agreement I had not made. My hands felt cold, though the air wasn't. Breath came shallow, catching against my ribs. I tried stopping mid-step. My boot hovered above the dirt. The other step finished first, pressed into the earth where nothing stood. A mark appeared beside mine, fresh, indented, real. I stared at it while the forest leaned closer. Two tracks moving forward together. One mine, one not. I turned back toward the cabin. Each step home carried that companion beside me. Branches rustled unevenly, as if reacting to two travelers. Even the birds shifted position twice. I began counting. 1, 2, 3. My steps landed on odd numbers. The other landed between them, a pattern I could not break. I jumped suddenly off the trail. Leaves scattered under my boots. Silence. No second step followed. Relief moved through me too quickly. Then, one step, off the trail, matching my new position. It had adjusted. Learning. The cabin appeared through trees, would pale against shadow. I rushed toward it. Footsteps hurried beside me, never touching mine, never falling out of sync. The porch boards groaned under my weight, and another groan followed. Same pitch, same pressure. I turned sharply. The porch was empty, but dust shifted where someone should have stood. Inside, the cabin air felt warmer, still, safe. I closed the door carefully. Waited. Nothing. No steps. Only the quiet ticking of cooling wood. I leaned against the wall, listening to my pulse. Then, one step outside the door. Not approaching. Not leaving. Just standing there. Waiting beside me. The fog arrived before dawn. Not drifting. Not spreading. It formed. Sharp lines between trees, like walls built overnight. I stepped outside and felt it immediately. Cold against my skin, but only in certain places. One step forward brought clear air. Half a step left and the fog pressed against my shoulder like glass. It had boundaries, edges. I reached toward it. My fingers vanished halfway. The rest of my arm remained visible. Depth behaved incorrectly. The forest beyond warped into pale shapes that folded inward. Sound moved strangely, too. A branch snapped somewhere behind me, but the echo arrived from the front. My breath sounded distant, as if traveling through tunnels. I walked along one fog wall. It followed a straight path through trees that grew naturally crooked. Geometry inside wilderness. Impossible lines cutting through chaos. I tried crossing. The fog resisted, not solid, not air, like walking into memory. Cold slid through my chest. For a moment I couldn't hear anything. Then whispers returned all at once. Leaves rustling far away. Water dripping nearby. Footsteps that were not mine. The fog rearranged itself slowly. Passages opened. Others sealed. Paths I remembered vanished behind blank white plains. Isolation crept in quietly. The cabin disappeared when I turned around. Only fog remained. I moved faster. The woods narrowed into corridors. Sound stretched thin. Even my footsteps felt delayed, arriving after my body had already moved. I called out once. My voice returned immediately. Too quickly, as if someone nearby repeated it softly. The fog shifted again. Trees appeared where open space had been. The path bent sharply without reason. I realized the fog wasn't covering the forest. It was choosing it, blocking directions, allowing others, guiding, or containing. I stopped moving. The fog tightened around me, edges closing, breath shallow, silence thick. Then, slowly, a single opening formed ahead, perfectly aligned with the cabin door. I walked through. Each step felt permitted. Behind me, the fog sealed itself. When I reached the porch, the woods vanished completely, only white beyond the railing. The fog waited there, still, structured, watching without eyes. The chair moved first, only a few inches, but enough that I noticed. I was certain it faced a window before. Now it angled toward the wall. I told myself I had forgotten. Morning light slid across the floorboards, revealing small changes everywhere. My boots were by the door. I remembered leaving them near the bed. The kettle rested on the table instead of the stove. A book open to a page I had never read. The cabin felt distracted, like someone trying to recall a dream. I placed objects carefully where they belonged, watched them, waited. Nothing happened. Relief came briefly. Then I turned away. When I looked back, the book had closed itself. Dust shifted where my hand had not touched. My jacket disappeared entirely. I searched every room. Closets, corners, under furniture. Gone. A strange emptiness followed, heavier than loss, as if part of my memory had been erased with it. Hours later, the jacket returned, folded neatly on the chair. Inside out, the pockets reversed. I checked them. Items remained, but rearranged. Keys where coins should be. Paper folded differently. The cabin wasn't stealing. It was misremembering. Walls creaked softly, wood settling like old bones adjusting. Photographs blurred when I stared too long. My reflection in a window felt unfamiliar. I began speaking my own name aloud. Quiet reminders. Proof I existed here. But even my voice sounded uncertain. At night, objects shifted more boldly. A cup appeared beside the bed. A lamp turned toward the door. The door itself opened halfway without noise. I woke, unsure which side of the room I slept on. The layout felt slightly wrong. Distances changed subtly. I walked from table to window and misjudged the number of steps. The cabin's memory was failing, and I was part of it. I wrote notes, left them everywhere. This is your chair. You live here. You arrived alone. By morning, some notes vanished. Others rewrote themselves. Letters smeared into shapes I didn't recognize. I touched the walls, warm, breathing slowly, trying to remember me, failing gently. Night arrived without sunset. Light simply faded away. I noticed the mirror first. It showed nothing. Not darkness, not distortion, just absence. I stepped closer. My hand touched cold glass. No movement returned. Behind me, the room existed. In front of me, empty space. I checked another surface. Window glass. Same result. No reflection. Only the forest beyond. Water in the sink remained still. No face. No shape. I leaned closer until breath fogged the surface. The fog appeared. But not me. Panic rose quietly. I moved quickly from room to room. Every reflective surface failed. Even shadows betrayed me. The lantern cast light. Furniture formed silhouettes. But mine flickered inconsistently. Sometimes missing entirely. Sometimes delayed. The world acknowledged everything except me. I stepped outside. Moonlight painted the clearing silver. The lake near the trees lay perfectly calm. I knelt beside it. Water mirrored stars. Trees. Clouds. Everything except the space where I stood. I felt unreal, like a thought not fully formed. My hands trembled in cold air. Leaves rustled behind me. I turned. Nothing there. But shadows moved independently now, sliding across ground without source. The woods felt aware of an absence, of something removed. Back inside, I avoided looking at glass. But absence followed anyway. Even blinking felt strange, as if eyes closed over nothing. I whispered my name again. The word echoed hollow. The cabin remained calm, unbothered, as if reflections had never existed. And maybe they hadn't. I saw it between trees at dusk, standing where I had just walked. Same posture, same coat, same stillness. It moved when I moved, but late, half a second behind. I raised my hand. It followed, delayed, like memory catching up. I stepped forward slowly. It mirrored me from across the clearing. Perfect distance maintained. Face unclear, not hidden, just unfinished. Every motion slightly wrong. Too smooth, too careful. I stopped. It stopped later. That delay felt unbearable. Proof it watched before acting. Learning me, I turned suddenly. It turned after. A correction, an imitation. I walked toward the cabin. It followed parallel through trees, never crossing my path, never approaching, only matching existence. When I ran, it ran. Branches snapped under unseen feet. Breath echoed twice. Mine first. Its second. At the porch I spun around. Empty forest. Then, one step late. Leaves compressed where it should stand. I backed inside. Door closed. Heartbeat loud. Through the window, movement lingered. A silhouette arriving seconds after I had moved away. It studied the cabin. Studied me. Practicing. I realized something slowly. It wasn't chasing. It was rehearsing. Becoming accurate. The delays shortened through the night. Half a second. A breath. Almost perfect. I feared the moment it would match completely, because then I would not know which one was real. Night repeated itself. At first, I thought I was tired. The kettle whistled twice. Same pitch, same steam pattern. I sat down and felt déjà vu sharpen into certainty. I had already done this. A bird cried outside. Again, identical. I stood quickly, walked outside. The wind paused, then restarted exactly as before. My footsteps followed grooves already made. Conversation with myself restarted mid-thought, words leaving my mouth before I chose them. Time folded quietly. Loops began at dusk, ended near dawn, then reset. Small events replayed perfectly, but each cycle carried faint distortion. A branch broke earlier. Fog moved differently. My memory remained while the world reset. I tried changing things. Moved a chair. Next loop, it returned. I shouted into woods. Next loop, the echo arrived before I spoke. Time was rehearsing something, practicing alignment. Each repetition tightened the pattern. Nights became predictable prisons. I waited for dawn desperately. Morning broke the loop, but exhaustion remained, because I remembered every version. And somewhere inside those repetitions, another presence learned alongside me. The door led back inside. I stepped out, opened it again. Same room, same chair, same light. I tried another exit. Window. Outside air touched my face. Then I stood again inside. No transition, just correction. The cabin folded space inward. Rooms connected impossibly. Hallways shortened. Corners returned me to starting points. Windows showed different forests each time. Snow outside one. Summer leaves outside another. Night beyond a third window. None matched reality. The cabin contained versions of the woods. I felt watched by architecture itself. Walls guiding movement, preventing departure. I ran once. Every door returned me, breath echoing through identical rooms. Eventually I stopped trying. Sat quietly. The cabin settled. Content, as of escape, had never been intended. Footsteps began at midnight. Not one, not two, many, circling the cabin. Perfect rhythm. Even spacing. Step, silence. Step. Silence stretched longer between each one. Anticipation filled the gaps. The ground vibrated faintly, surrounding me completely. I counted dozens, all synchronized, moving closer with each circuit. Would creak beneath invisible weight. Porch board sighed repeatedly. The steps never rushed, never hesitated. A ritual, a gathering. Eventually they stopped moving, stationary around the cabin, waiting. Then one step sounded directly beneath me. Inside, matching my heartbeat, the forest froze. Wind halted mid-motion. Leaves suspended. Even insects ceased. Silence absolute. Air heavy and unmoving. I stepped outside. Nothing reacted. No sound followed movement. My breath vanished instantly. The world paused entirely. Except footsteps, one at a time, approaching through frozen trees. Unavoidable, measured, final. Each step carried certainty. Reality waited for arrival. And I understood something approaching completion. I sat in the cabin as the last footsteps arrived. They did not come through the door. They ended inside me. Memories shifted, reordered. I realized the second footsteps had never walked beside me. They walked within me. Every loop, every reflection lost, every mimic in the woods. Practice, not replacing me, revealing me. The cabin had not forgotten. It had been remembering correctly. I was never alone here. Something entered when I arrived. Or maybe something awakened. The final footsteps were mine. Paths I never remembered walking. Moments lived by another version of me. The delay ended. No separation remained. Breath slowed. Silence softened. Outside, the woods resumed gently. Wind returned. Leaves moved again. But I understood now. The presence had always been inside, waiting to synchronize, waiting for recognition. I sat very still, listening. Only one set of footsteps remained, and they were perfectly mine. Then even those faded into silence,